set on a journey to ultimate wisdom. He traveled through pain and suffering to reach nirvana, the everlasting bliss we all dreamed of. He was the Buddha. He grew up in a palace surrounded by luxury and a beautiful woman, but he gave all that up to gain ultimate wisdom. He traveled the darkest corridors of his mind to come face to face with the devil inside him. He founded the first world religion, followed today by over 400 million people, a religion where meditation is used to reach the state of complete peace and happiness. The events of his life make up one of the greatest stories ever told. Ladies and gentlemen, we proudly present you Life of the Buddha.
"2,500 years ago, northern India was divided up into kingdoms and republics. The Buddha's father, King Suddhodana, was elected as chief of Sakya's tribe. His kingdom was called Kapilavastu city. His beautiful wife was Queen Maya. King Suddhodana and Queen Maya lived happily in Kapilavastu. One night, a dream came to Maya as she slept, and she was told that a great person who sought supreme knowledge was about to come into her family. Then she realized she was pregnant. Months passed. One day, the queen knew that the time was approaching for a son to be born. She went to King Suddhodana and she said to him,
My lord, I would like to wander through the Lumbini garden. Birds are singing in the trees, and the sky is bright with flower dust. I really want to go to the Lumbini garden.
Array yourself today in great splendor, Maya. Ride in a gorgeous palanquin. Let your most beautiful maidens carry you. Order your servants to use rare perfumes. Have them wear ropes of pearls and bracelets of precious stones. And have them sing sweet songs that would delight the gods themselves.
The queen stepped out and began wandering about aimlessly. She was happy, and behold, she found a rare tree, the branches drooping under their burden of the blossoms. She went up to it, gracefully extending her hand. She drew down a branch. Suddenly, she stood very still. She smiled, and the maidens who were near her received a lovely child into their arms.
At the same moment, all that was alive in the world trembled with joy. The sick were rid of their suffering. The hungry were satisfied. Those to whom wine had played false became sober. Madmen recovered their reason. The weak regained their strength, and the poor got their wealth. Prisons opened their gates. The wicked were cleansed of all evil. The child was named Siddhartha, meaning every wish fulfilled.
When Siddhartha reached the age of marriage, King Suddhodana found him a wife named Yashodhara. She was beautiful and full of grace. Prince Siddhartha lived happily with his wife, the princess. Then, beautiful Yashodhara bore the prince a son, and he was given the name Rahula.
However, Siddhartha lived in a palace without knowing the nature outside. One day, someone spoke in the presence of the prince and told how the grass in the woods had become a tender green, and the birds in the trees were singing of the spring, and how in the ponds the great lotuses were unfolding. Then, like an elephant too long confined in his stable, the prince had an irresistible desire to leave the palace.
The king learned of his son's desire, and he knew of no way to oppose it. But King Siddhartha ordered the road to be cleared of beggars, of those who are sick and infirm, and of who suffer, in order to make sure that Siddhartha must think nothing that will trouble the serenity of his soul, and he must never suspect the evil there's in the world.
When the time came, the king sent for his son, and there were tears in his eyes as he kissed him on the brow. His gaze lingered over him. Then he said to him, "Go!" And with that word, he gave him permission to leave the palace, though his heart spoke differently.
Siddhartha went out of the kingdom, away from his father's influence. First, he noticed an old man painfully making his way through the village. The man was using a walking stick. He was worn out and decrepit. His veins stood out on his body, his teeth chattered, and his skin was a maze of black wrinkles. A few dirty grey hair hung from his scalp. His head and limbs were palsied.
The prince saw this being, so different from the men around him. He gazed at him with sorrowful eyes, and he asked the charioteer, "What is this man with grey hair and body so bent? He clings to his staff with scrawny hands. His eyes are dull, and his limbs falter. Is he a monster? Has nature made him thus, or is it chance?"
The charioteer answered, "The witch mars beauty, which ruins vigor, which causes sorrows and kills pleasure, that which weakens the memory and destroys the senses, is old age." He too was once a child, nursing at his mother's breast. He grew. He was young once. He had strength and beauty. Then he reached the twilight of his years. And now you see him, the ruin that is old age.
The prince was deeply moved. He asked, "Will that be my fate too?"
The charioteer replied, "My lord, youth will also leave you someday. To you too will come troublesome old age. Time saps our strength and steals our beauty."
The prince shuddered like a bull at the sound of thunder. He uttered a deep sigh and shook his head. His eyes wandered from the wretched man to the happy crowds.
Siddhartha then noticed a sick man. He stared at him and asked the charioteer, "What is this man with a swollen stomach?" He's deathly pale, and pitiful cries escaped from his lips. He gasped for breath. "See, he's falling! Charioteer, charioteer, what is this man?"
The charioteer answered, "My lord, this man knows the torments of sickness. It is weakness itself, yet he too was once healthy and strong."
The prince looked at the man with pity, and he asked again, "Is this affliction peculiar to this man, or are all creatures threatened with sickness?"
The charioteer answered, "We too may be visited similar affliction. Sickness weighs heavily upon the world."
When he heard this painful truth, the prince began to tremble like a moonbeam reflected in the waves of the sea. Siddhartha turned to another direction of his trip. This time, he saw a corpse. Two men were carrying it, weeping. Siddhartha asked, "What is he?"
The charioteer replied, "My lord, he has neither intelligence, nor feeling, nor breath. He sleeps without consciousness, like grass or a piece of wood. Pleasure and suffering are meaningless to him now, and friend and enemy alike have deserted him."
The prince was troubled. He said, "Is this a condition peculiar to this man? Or does the same end await all creatures?"
And the charioteer answered, "This same end awaits all creatures, whether of humble or of noble birth. To every being who lives in the world, death comes inevitably."
Siddhartha was totally shocked. As for the first time, the young prince, living with airy luxury, encountered old age, disease, and death in reality. But it was the fourth sign that would definitely point to Siddhartha's future. A man wearing a single robe with a begging bowl. Why should anyone give up the pleasure of the world and walk the countryside begging? Asked the prince.
The charioteer replied, "The man has renounced such pleasures in order to confront reality and seek answers to this painful existence."
After the journey, Siddhartha returned to his palace. His mind was seething with his new understanding of the world. The food and flowers around him were rot. Even the world of the palace will one day crumble. His beautiful wife and a lovely son will one day grow old and die as well. He had learned the meaning of impermanence. So Siddhartha decided to leave his family in order to seek the answers to life suffering.
When the sun finally peered between the eyelids of night, the most noble of men saw that he was near a wood where dwelt many pious hermits. Deer were asleep under the trees, and birds fluttered about fearlessly. Siddhartha felt rested, and he thought he need go no further. The hero took off his jewels and his gorgeous robe, cut his long hair, and handed them to his charioteer to take back to the palace. Arrayed in his reddish-colored robes, the saintly hero set out on the path to the hermitage. He was like the king of the mountains, wrapped in clouds at dusk, and the charioteer, with a heavy heart, took the road back to Kapilavastu.
Siddhartha was alone for the first time. Now, he needed to face reality. He hoped to find a solution for the pain and suffering of existence.
Meanwhile, he realized that the solution to this suffering should be available to everyone, rather than exclusive to a few, as Brahmins believed. He then decided to focus on the technique of meditation. He practiced quite well, but he also realized that by this technique only, the problem of suffering could not be solved thoroughly. He set out to explore other techniques.
This time, he focused on his body. This method involved things like fasting, not washing, and meditating whilst holding his breath for an extremely long time. Siddhartha tried to achieve the state of liberation without physical limitation. So he fasted for so long that his life hung by a thread.
Just as Siddhartha was about to die of starvation, a young girl saved his life by giving him a bowl of milk. He then realized that if he starved himself again, he would die, having achieved nothing. Constraining one's body to an extreme condition was not a solution of the suffering. By chance, Siddhartha came across a musician tuning his harp. When the string was too slack, it would not play. When it was too tight, it would not play either. Somewhere in the middle gave the perfect harmony. Siddhartha realized this simple observation symbolized something that was of great importance. It was the middle way that would lead his mind to the state which he was looking for, the state of enlightenment.
Siddhartha arrived at Buddah, where he sat down beneath the Bodhi tree and vowed not to leave until he reached enlightenment. He started to focus his mind on the attention of breath, coming in and going out, and the refined sensations that existed in the body in a way that will lead to the purifying of the mind.
Siddhartha's mind was so focused that he could successfully enter the darkest part of his unconsciousness. Then, he met his final and greatest torment, the demon Mara, the lord of evil illusion, who is also the king of death and desire.
He wanted to make any horror real in Siddhartha's mind. Mara unleashed an army of demons to attack Siddhartha and to fire flaming arrows at him. Siddhartha turned them into lotus blossoms, and they fell harmlessly around him.
Having failed, then Mara tried to seduce Siddhartha with his demon daughters. His 3 daughters were passion, lust, and aversion. Siddhartha was completely calm and indifferent, and gazed at them without any feelings of affection. Before Siddhartha's eyes and disappeared into the earth.
Siddhartha was now aged 35, passed through all obstacles and reached enlightenment, and become the Buddha, or the awakened one. He then spent 7 days beneath the Bodhi tree in a meditative state of absolute bliss. In this enlightened state, Buddha saw a way to escape the inevitable cycle of old age, sickness, and death. He realized that if we remove desire, we can remove dissatisfaction and suffering from our lives. The insight the Buddha attained beneath the tree was the birth of Buddhism. The Buddha teaches his wisdom in 4 noble truths, which are the foundation of all Buddhist beliefs.
The first noble truth recognize there is suffering in life. The second noble truth diagnose the cause of that suffering, desire. In the third noble truth, the Buddha revealed that there's a cure for desire. In the fourth noble truth, the Buddha gave the prescription how to cure the illness and to achieve enlightenment, or the state of nirvana.
The Buddha will further teach morality, the meditation, and wisdom, which are the stepping stones towards enlightenment. He will dedicate the rest of his life helping others to follow this path towards freedom from suffering.
Okay, thank you very much.
A big thank you to London Chapter Buddhist Light International Association for the very interesting and meaningful play.
How impressive it is, isn't it? Okay, Karina, you know, when Buddha entered, when Priest Siddhartha entered Buddhahood, all the fairies from the heaven came down to dance for him.
All the fairies came down to dance for him?
Yeah, sure, because they celebrated for new Buddha.
Right. And I think our next performance is themed around fairies. Do you want to introduce the next one?
Yeah, sure, definitely. 好的，接下来我们下一个是由我们来自敦煌的仙女们为我们所带来的天女散花舞蹈表演。
Next up, we have a Dunhuang dance performance. These heavenly fairies blessing the earth with scattering blossoms. Let us all give them a big round of applause.
请掌声鼓励欢迎我们来自敦煌的美女们。